as the presenters were showing, today's the nervous system and visual and auditory system. So we're gonna go over the terminologies for each organ system, and then if you have time left, we're gonna go over the case report 6. So right on to get started with the nervous system. Um, cause O is a combining form that means burning sensation or burn. And one context it is used is a term called causalgia. So causo, burning, plus suffix algia. If you remember, like it's any kind of like a pain. So causalgia is a chronic burning sensation or pain after injury to a sensory nerve. And this is typically due to nerve damage during surgery, which I learned while I was researching for this. Apparently, if the surgeon accidentally touches or tears sensory nerve during the surgery, it can trigger that irritation and burning sensation. Okay. Cerebro is a combining form. That means cerebrum, pretty straightforward. So cerebrum is also called a forebrain. So that's your brain, like in a nutshell, very simple diagram. You have a brainstem um, and cerebellum. Those are not sure if it's the right term, but I call like old brain. Like it's those were existing in like uh, more evolutionary, like ancient time too. So those are cerebellum is responsible for like your muscle coordination or balance and some kind of parasympathetic nervous system signaling that doesn't require your consciousness, like balancing like ion concentrations and stuff like that. That's what cerebellum does. Brainstem, I think, is also involved in like a balance, and cerebrum is more like what defines human. So it's also called the forebrain. So cerebrum has the part that makes you think, memorize, have emotion, and all those kind of like conscious activities happens in cerebrum. And but like a motor regulations or parasympathetic signaling also still happens in cerebrum. So enough of that. So cerebral palsy is one example. So cerebro plus al pertaining to plus palsy. So palsy is a term that means paralysis. I couldn't find any like root of that word palsy, but you can kind of like memorize it's like a similarity to the word paralysis, palsy, paralysis. So cerebral palsy is a group of disorders with poor muscle control due to cerebral damage in developing brain, most often before birth. So it doesn't necessarily imply it is genetic, as in before birth, like while you were still a fetus, maybe some kind of like shock was given to like the baby in the womb that could have caused some traumatic injury while the brain is while the brain was developing. That could have resulted in paralysis on one side of the body, for example. And another term that used the word palsy is called Bell's palsy. It's like kind of like a famous example related to paralysis. So Bell's palsy is a temporary weakness or paralysis of the facial muscles on one side of the face. So this is like the characteristic, I guess, face of like the Bell's palsy. Your one side of the brain is just normal looking face, but the other side, like the eyes are drooping, mouth is drooping, and even like this nose area is like a little drooping too. So that in itself, you might think you just have like a drooping face, like it's probably not that serious, but that kind of hints us to more serious problem with the neurons happening behind. So Bell's palsy is kind of like a, I guess, diagnosis tool for someone having like a serious nervous system problem. Um, Contus O is a combining form that means bruise. So one example is cerebral contusion. So cerebral kind of cover that's like relating to cerebrum. Contuso, bruise plus suffix ion condition. So cerebral contusion is a bruising of a brain tissue. This is like a scan image of a person's brain having a cerebral contusion, and you can see only that area where the red arrow is like pointing at has like that white portion that doesn't look like the other parts. That's probably where the blood was leaking out and having like a pool of blood in the middle of the brain. Um, Concuss O is a combining form that means violently agitated or shaked. So I think the only example is concussion. So concussion is concusso plus eon. Okay, I think that was a typo. It's supposed to be like a condition, but concussion is a traumatic brain injury from a blow or violently shaking. So there are like three types of concussion. If you have like a direct impact on one specific point of your brain, it's called a direct impact injury. As per the definition, if you have your head really violently shaken, it's called a acceleration deceleration injury. And there's also another one, more modern one called blast injury. This is mostly due to some kind of like explosion, or for example, like during the war, blast injury could happen a lot. Um, Encephalo is a combining form that means brain. So encephalitis is one example. Encephalo plus suffix itis. Inflammation, so inflammation of the brain. And encephalitis is typically caused by viral infections of the brain. And usually viral infections of the brain uh, don't normally happen because there is something called blood-brain barrier uh, in the blood vessels that contact with the brain. So this would be like your blood vessel, and those are some supporting cells, as the presenters were saying. There's like astrocytes, pericytes, and stuff like that. And normal cells would just have like a lot of different molecules just diffuse through, or have like a transporter to like exchange those materials. But we call something blood-brain barrier because it is very selective. These supportive cells choose what they can pass through the blood-brain barrier to bring it to the brain or not. For example, some lipid-soluble molecules can be passed through, but large charged molecules, proteins, and in this context, pathogens are very selectively blocked from entering through the blood-brain barrier to the brain. So that's like a protection system. And it has become like a big thing during the COVID. I mean, it's still going, but a lot of people were experiencing like long COVIDs, and many research was saying the long COVID is might be due to the virus that mostly infects lungs actually passing through the blood-brain barrier to infect the brain. Though I don't know if there are that many evidence about it. Another, I think, hypothesis was like the virus is already cleared out and dead, but the antigens from the virus still circulate the body and somehow enter through the blood-brain barrier and cause inflammation in the brain. I think that was another hypothesis, though I'm not sure if there was that much progress in that side since then.
Pathogens can enter the blood-brain barrier?
Normally no, but if you have like either damage in the supporter cells that line the blood-brain barrier, or mostly usually due to age, they kind of like deteriorate, or for example, like some kind of infection can cause like inflammation, and that can like chew up those cells that line the blood-brain barrier, and that can cause like some leakage too. I think that was one of like the hypotheses for like that how COVID could enter brain too. But normally, no, it should not enter. Ideally, yeah.
African sleeping sickness does, right?
Oh, it does. What kind of like infection?
Trypanosomas cruzi,
Brucey.
and then they go into a coma.
I see. It's like a viral infection or
Protozoa.
a protozoa. I see. Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know like how it should be like really. There should be like a really big gap or like a leak for like the protozoa to pass through the blood-brain barrier. Yeah, I wanna research more on that. Interesting. Thank you. Uh, Cortic O is a combining form that means cortex or outer region. So if you remember from like the urinary system lecture last time, like the outer region was the cortex and the inner region was like a medulla in the kidney. So kind of like the same way cortex is like a outer region, but of the brain. So in this diagram, it kind of shows the outer region that's colored more in like a brownish color is where like the actual cell body of the neuron is in your brain. So neurons usually look like a one big cell body, and like a really long branch comes off, and like it's called axons that comes off and like branch out to the inner area. So all the cell bodies are here, and because cell bodies are more dense, and when you like do like a CT scan or something like that, it kind of shows up as more darker. So they call it like gray matter. That's where the cortex is, and inner part where the axons and multiple different like supportive cells are is called the white matter or subcortex, kind of as in like a below inner cortex, opposite of the cortex. So cortical is one example, cortico plus al pertaining to the cerebral cortex. Aesthesia is a suffix that means some kind of sensation or feeling. So paresthesia is one example. Para is a prefix that means abnormal. And aesthesia is a suffix that means sensation and feeling. So paresthesia, abnormal sensation. So abnormal tingling or prickling sensation. So this is when you like sit down on like one place for like a long time and you start feeling like the numbness on your like finger or your like leg or feet. That's the paresthesia. And the numbness happens because the nerve is compressed for prolonged time, and it either could not get enough like nutrients, or there was like too much signaling going because it's keep getting compressed, resulting in like a pain or numbness. So that's paresthesia. S that O is combining form. That means feeling, but more of a sense of perception or sense, I'd say. So one example is anesthetic. I think you guys all know what anesthetics are. So an prefix that means without, esteto, plus suffix ik pertaining to. So pertaining to without sense of perception. So those are the medication that causes you to lose sensation. And if you inject a lot, you kind of lose consciousness, as in like during the surgery. So suffix mania, like as in maniac, the suffix that means madness. So pyromania is one example. Pyro is a combining form that means fire. Mania plus mania. So pyromania is a disorder characterized by obsessive desire to set things on fire. I don't know how like your brain circuits have to be rewired for you to have like a desire to set things on fire, but that is a real thing. Meningo is a combining form that means meninges. So meninges um are so this is like a kind of like a cross section of your brain. The outer layer is like a skin, and then if you go in, there's like a bone skull that lines your brain, and below that are three membranes called durameter, arachnoid, and piam, piameter. Yeah, piameter. Uh, those three membranes are what people call meninges. Those are the membranes that is like the kind of like the last line of defense for the brain from external shock or damage. So meningitis is one example. So meningitis is meningo plus itis inflammation, so inflammation of the meninges. And meningitis is primarily caused by bacterial and viral infections. Um, it's not that bacteria and virus like grow on the meninges and like eat them, but it's more like bacteria and virus infections can cause inflammation. It recruits the immune cells to attack the meninges, and that can cause damage to meninges. And one example is meningococcal. Coccal is a term that means cocci, pertaining to cocci. Cocci is like a type of bacteria, I guess family of bacteria, and these family of bacteria is known for causing meningococcal. Okay. So near I or near O, pretty straightforward, is a nerve. It's a combining form that means nerve or nerve tissue. So this came up during the presentation. Peripheral neuropathy. So peripheral, more on the uh, edges of your body, and neuropathy, neuro plus suffix pathy, disease, is a disorder of the peripheral nerves causing pain, sensory loss, or weakness. So I think in this example, um, it's showing mainly in terms of myelin sheath. The presenters were briefly mentioning myelin sheath is a basically one functions as like a protective layer for uh, neurons axons, because it might already seem to you it's very like skinny, just long strand of like extension from the cell. Something's got to protect it. But two, more importantly, myelin sheaths help boost the speed of transduction of those signals. So each one of those myelin sheaths kind of acts as like a almost like a accelerator for the signal to jump from like here to the next myelin sheath gap, and then to another one, another one, another one. So instead of going like a straight path, it's more like a jump, 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 jump. if you have a myelin sheath. So it is very important in very efficient, fast signal transduction. If you have a problem with myelin sheath and it's damaged, this can cause peripheral neuropathy in the peripheral neurons. Yeah. Suffix phasia is a suffix that means speak or speech. Aphasia is one example. A prefix that means without. Aphasia. So aphasia is impaired ability to speak or understand language. And I don't know that much about myself, but at least according to this diagram, that area called Broca's area in the brain is responsible for producing speech, and Wernicke's area, highlighted green, is responsible for understanding and processing speech. So if either of those two regions are affected, you could get aphasia. Okay, so suffix phobia, abnormal fear of something. So claustrophobia is one example. Claustro is a combining form that means barrier. And suffix phobia, so claustrophobia, fear of barrier. So abnormal fear of being enclosed in small or enclosed spaces. Okay. Psych-O is a combining form that means mind. So one example is psychotic disorder. This one's pretty straightforward. Psycho plus tic. Suffix that means pertaining to. So it's a group of severe mental disorder with loss of contact with reality. So call like someone's like a psycho. That's like what psychotic in medical terms it's psychotic disorder. Huh? Yeah. Okay. Radicule low is a combining form that means nerve root. And well, you can kind of like see in that diagram, the nerve roots is that area where the black arrows are pointing at, and that's like a cross section of your vertebra. So radiculopathy is one example. Radiculo plus pathy, kind of condition. It's a disorder from compression of nerve roots causing pain or neurologic deficits. And herniated disc can result in radiculopathy. So if you remember, hernia, something protruding out and invading area that it's not supposed to. So your vertebra has like discs in between. It's like a kind of more like a fluid-filled sac, but more like solidy, like gel-like. But the disc can protrude out in case of like damage to your spinal cord, and that herniated disc can compress on the nerve roots, as shown in like that arrows, and that can cause some pain or inflammation. So herniated disc is one of the bigger cause of like the radiculopathy. Suffix tropic is having an affinity for something. So psychotropic drug. Psycho, combining for them is mind, plus tropic. So psychotropic drugs are drugs acting on the central nervous system that affects the mind, emotions, and behavior. So these are the antidepressants, the stimulants, um, all the uh, hallucinating drugs like cocaine, MDMA, ecstasy. All those are also psychotropic drugs. Well, it's not that I'm doing, but suffix sclerosis is a suffix that means abnormal hardening of something. And one example is, I think we actually did this in first lecture, but I still decided to bring it up back for nervous system. So what multiple sclerosis is one example, multi, many of something, and sclerosis. So multiple sclerosis is hardening of the brain and spinal cord caused by immune system attacking the myelin sheaths of the nerve fibers. So it's that protective tubes myelin sheaths I was talking about. If immune system gets activated either due to like viral infections, bacterial infections, it can cause them to attack those myelin sheaths, or it could be like an autoimmune disease. Your immune system just like gets activated on its own, and that can kind of like chew off of like the myelin sheath, expose your nerve fibers, and that can cause some pain, uh, or also decrease signal transduction because of uh, the myelin sheath having the damage. Um, Another example is amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, which is basically Lou Gehrig's disease, also called ALS in short. So A without myo, muscle, and trophic. Amyotrophic is like loss of muscle mass, loss of like muscle integrity, and lateral towards the side. In this context, it means specific subset of neurons called lateral motor neurons, and sclerosis hardening. So ALS is a disorder characterized by lateral motor neuron degeneration and muscle wasting. And this results in scarring, or also called hardening of the motor neuron. So similar to the multiple sclerosis case, ALS nerve also have a problem with the myelin sheath, and could also have problem with like other parts of the neuron too. And that decreases like the signal that goes to the muscle, or aberrant signal that might go to the muscle, and results in a atrophy of the muscle. That's hence the name amyotrophic.
Well, you know the neuroprotein? When they go at normal, they do it.
Oh really? I didn't know neuron was important.
I know.
Okay. Okay. On to visual plus auditory system. This one's pretty short. So suffix opia is a suffix that means any kind of visual condition. Hyperopia, hypero, excessive or something, plus opia, vision condition. So farsightedness as in hyperopia. If there's farsightedness, should be short-sightedness too. So myopia, myo, it's the same combining form that means muscle, but in this case, it means short-sighted. So myopia, the nearsightedness, and normal vision looks like that. Your focus lands on the retina, which is the part that's very rich with like a lot of like visual neurons, like cones and rods. Um, when myopia occurs, the focus lands before the retina, so things far away can't be easily seen. But if you move things closer, that focus can land back into retina, and you can finally see it. Kind of the opposite for hyperopia. Presbyo is a combining form that means old age. So presbyopia is one example. So presbyo, old age plus opia, basically a visual condition of old age-related loss of near focusing. So it is very similar to hyperopia. You lose like a nearsighted vision, but there's like a subtle difference. I think the field of medicine decided to distinguish presbyopia from the hyperopia. It's similar to hyperopia, but presbyopia is mostly commonly occurs only in like people of age of over 40, and hyperopia is usually due to your shape of your eye. Like if your eye is like too, I guess, too thin, like your eyeball should look like this, but it gets like truncated a little, then that focus lands on like way after retina because of that. That's like how people at young age, like people of 12, like even 8 could get hyperopia like that. But presbyopia, it's when you lose elasticity in the lens. The lens can also control like how wide this angle of the focus forming is. That's how you will be able to focus like things closer, like lens will adjust so that like you can see things this distance, and like also far away, then like your lens will like stretch out to be able to see things far away. But presbyopia is when you have the loss of elasticity in the eye lens. And I think, not too sure about this one, but unlike hyperopia, presbyopia is more of like a blurriness of the nearsighted vision. Another presby term, so suffix cusis is a suffix that means hearing. So presbycusis is a term that means age-related hearing loss. I think this one's pretty straightforward. Ophthalmo is a combining form that means eye or vision. So one example, ophthalmoscopy, ophthalmo plus scopy, visual examination. So visual examination of the interior of the eye. So when you look through ophthalmoscope, you can see not just like the surface level, but you can see through inside to the retina as well. So maybe you can check if there's like a burst of like a blood vessel in the retina. That could be like a problem. You can check with the ophthalmoscope and like that. Opt-O is a combining form that also means eye or vision. So optometrist is one example. Opt-O plus metro, measure something like meter east specialist. So optometrist specialist who measures and manages vision. So optometrists are the ones who kind of like check your eye and see how bad your eyesight is and suggest like glasses. Ophthalmologists are the ones that deal with more like eye-related diseases. Um, O is a combining form that means ear or hearing. And the example I brought was otoria. So oto plus discharge, ria. So otoria is ear discharge. And for example, have like an infection that results in discharge, ear discharge. Okay, I think that was it for the terms I prepared today. Um, I do really want to go over this one, so I will keep going. So the case reports for last week was I guess for yesterday was the euglycemic diabetic ketoacidosis induced by sodium glucose cotransporter 2 inhibitor in the setting of prolonged fasting. It was very kind of like a cell biology heavy, so I apologize if it was too much work or too much outside research you had to do outside this paper, but I thought it was interesting. So there's like a diabetes, but there's also a subset of problem that could result from diabetes called diabetic ketoacidosis, also called DKA in short. So diabetic ketoacidosis, so keto as in ketones. It's a molecule that kind of looks like this uh, in your body. It's a very simple molecule, carbons and like oxygen. But yeah, so those are ketones, and acid O is combining from acid uh, osis condition, so ketoacidosis, um, acidification due to presence of ketone. So presence of ketone usually results in acidification of like the environment because of some biochemical mechanisms. So diabetic ketoacidosis is complication that usually happens in diabetic patients when carbohydrate deficiency forces fat as energy source. So because you lack carbohydrates, or actually I'll probably go over this first. So you probably know like problem with diabetic people is they have too much sugars in the blood. Then why would you call like a carbohydrate deficiency? Does anyone have like an answer for it?
because you can't metabolize it. There's a lot of glucose, but you don't have the enzyme to break it down and run through glycolysis.
Exactly. It just exists in the blood. There's so many of them, but insulin is the hormone that helps bring them into the cells so the cells can actually use those to make energy. But less insulin present, you can't really bring those sugars inside your body, inside your cells to actually use them. So kind of ironic. There's so many sugar in your blood, but still your cells are very deficient of carbohydrates. Because of that, it decides to use fat instead of carbohydrates, and this usually more happens in like a liver. But fat digestion usually results in accumulation of ketones. As I said, ketones can cause the cellular environment more acidic, so ketoacidosis. And that's what DKA are. Euglycemic DKA. So U is a prefix that means good or normal level. Glyco, sugar, and emic. If you remember, like emia plus ic, pertaining to blood condition. So euglycemic, it's a variant of DKA that are where the patients have normal blood glucose levels. So sodium glucose cotransporter 2, in short, it's called SGLT2. It goes kind of like deep into very like molecular biology mechanisms, but to keep it simple, it's a transporter that transports glucose from your urine to back to your body so that you don't lose all the glucose into your urine, and you can reabsorb some back so that you can use for example, like use for energy, I was saying. And if you inhibit those transporters that bring glucose from the urine to the cell back, it will secrete all the glucose away into the urine, and the cells will not be able to uh, get the glucose back. So the blood glucose level will actually decrease a little compared to diabetic case. And one example of inhibitors of SGLT2 are dapagliflozin. I think that was an example in the case report. So inhibitors of SGLT2 are associated with euglycemic diabetic ketoacidosis in the setting of prolonged fasting. If the person already has diabetic ketoacidosis, inhibitor of SGLT2 can result in euglycemic, or actually, no, I think it was more like SGLT2 inhibition itself can cause a euglycemic diabetic ketoacidosis. So you don't have to know that much about like all the like mechanisms, like why that's happening, but I kind of want you to know like the terms. So it's one excerpt from the case report. Diabetic ketoacidosis, DKA, is defined by certain diagnostic criteria, including blood glucose level of more than 13.9 millimole per liter, or 250 milligram per deciliter. And acidosis, remember acido plus osis from the previous slide, acidic condition. Acidosis as in arterial pH, so pH of the artery is less than 7.3. So pH of 7.5 to 8 is what's more like a, people call like a physiological pH. If it is lower than that, it's more acidic. Serum bicarbonate is if it is, and serum bicarbonate is less than 15 milli EQ. I don't know what that unit is per liter. So bicarbonate is what's called a buffer in your cardiovascular system. So getting your blood acidified is very bad. Carbon dioxide that blood transports to secrete out of the body is actually a molecule that causes your blood to get more acidic, and bicarbonate is your body's way of preventing like that acidification from happening due to carbon dioxide. And ketonemia, so ketones plus emia, blood condition. So ketonemia is a presence of ketone bodies in the blood. And ketonemia. Euglycemic diabetic ketoacidosis is defined as follows. Blood glucose levels below 13.9, which was more than 13.9 in the diabetic ketoacidosis, and acidosis, development of ketonemia. So this was one table that was in the case report. You can kind of like try to read like what the table says. From the top, the blood glucose level. This one's pretty straightforward. Reference range is more like what they saw on like a control or like a normal patients, and ED is what the person really had. So it says 13.5, and if you compare to that number from the text, it was 13.9. If it's below 13.9, it was 13.5. That would be the euglycemic instead of the glycemic and diabetic ketoacidosis. And pH, the ED, look at it, 6.92 is less than 7.3, so it kind of falls in the criteria. HCO3 is the chemical formula for bicarbonate, and that was 4, what's the unit? Milli EQ over L liter. And since that was below that 15, so it also fits in criteria. So that's how they told, okay, this patient has a euglycemic diabetic ketoacidosis. Another excerpt. However, the proposed pathophysiological mechanism is that SGLT2 blockers decrease blood glucose levels by increasing glycosuria. So glycosuria is a glucose plus urea suffix that means urine from the last lecture. Glycosuria, glucose in the urine. So SGLT2 blocking increases glycosuria because you prevent bringing those glucose back into your body by blocking that transporter. So now you have all the glucose in the urine, and decreasing endogenous insulin secretion. So endogenous, endo prefix that means within, genus produced within. So endogenous produced within an organism or system. And endogenous insulin secretion is also decreased. Less insulin, kind of like a hallmark of diabetes. In addition, they directly stimulate alpha cells to produce more glucagon. So alpha cells are cells in your pancreas that is primarily responsible for producing glucagon. Glucagon is basically the opposite of insulin. It causes more, it kind of prevents cells from getting like the carbohydrates to use as energy, and it breaks down like available stored carbohydrates in your body to be available in the blood system. So, and produce more glucagon in response to hypoglycemia, hypo deficient or decreased, plus glycemia, low blood glucose, and decrease insulin secretion. As a result of this effect, more glucagon is produced, which promotes hepatic ketogenesis. So glucagon also causes a lot of like free-floating, what's it called? Free-floating carbohydrates to transport to your liver, and in the liver, you will use that to create ketone from those. No, actually, it's not the carbohydrates. The carbohydrates will go to the liver as well, but another effect glucagon has is it triggers more fats to be broken down into ketones, broken down for energy, then have a byproduct of ketones, as in hepatic ketogenesis. Hepato, liver, pertaining to ic, ketogenesis, creation of ketones, production of ketone bodies in the liver. So that was very term-heavy paper, but okay, I'm kind of gonna skip this. And announcement for this week, there's quite a lot. So because next Monday is Veterans Day, we're not gonna have a lecture here. Yeah, enjoy your break. But there will still be case report assignments. One's gonna due next Monday. Another one's gonna be due the Monday after that. And the final project, which I named like roleplay project, is coming up. So you can either sign up for November 25th. I think that's like a Tuesday before the Thanksgiving break, or after that, Tuesday after that week, December 2nd. So you can sign up for either one of the day. And if you sign up for one of the day, you don't have to come to the class. I'm not gonna take any attendance on those 2 days. Yeah, and I'll also share this announcement through the courses with the link, so you can sign up through that Google Sheet to decide like which project, which day you want to do, and also, not sure if you guys seen the syllabus yet, but it's basically like a role play between one person acting as like a doctor and the other person acting as a patient, and the person who's assigned as a doctor, I will make like a sheet of paper. I'll like post that in the B courses in advance too. that have a lot of like a diagnosis of different diseases, but the symptoms or whatever kind of like a treatment you have to give, I will write them in like as much like medical terms as possible. So it's like your chance to like try to use all the terms you learned in the semester and like try to understand like the real actual terms used in the field. The patients, if you were acting as a patient, I'm not gonna release anything in advance, but on the day I will give you like a paper with multiple different terms that describe your symptom. And if you know the term, what the term means, you'll probably be able to guess what that symptom is, like hypothermia, less lack of your body temperature, low body temperature. So I'm like shivering cold. That's like what you would say to the doctor, and the doctor have to guess like what problem you're having. So okay, it might sound very difficult, but it's very low stake. I am already planning everyone to have 100 as long as you show efforts, like as long as you're like engaged during the conversation. So don't feel too pressured. You don't have to memorize every single term. Kind of like what I think is more important is like knowing the gist of it, or knowing like a important like a marker terms like hypo lower, hyper higher, thermo like some kind of temperature, like osis some kind of condition. Those kind of things will be more helpful. So don't stress too much. Uh, yeah, no lecture next week. The week after that, November 18th, endocrine system and pharmacological abbreviations. That last one will be probably like very relevant if you either want to do like pharmacy school or want to work in like a clinical office or something like that. And group 12 will present for the organ systems on that day. Yep. So that's it. Oh, don't forget to sign up for the attendance sheet. I have it up here. Let me bring my pen.